I've been on over 50 roller coasters, and some have been great, some not so much. But sometimes, it isn't the coaster that phases me as much as one element. Sometimes elements like this can surprise me with how good they are, and other times they can end up being very disappointing. Today, I'm going on both sides of the spectrum and giving you my 10 most surprising and disappointing elements on coasters that I have ridden. The number 10 most disappointing element that I have been on, and the least disappointing on this list, is the last 3 airtime hills on Goliath at Six Flags over Georgia. The reason this ranks lowest is because they are good, however, they still fell below my expectations. I was told before riding that they could have some good ejector, but all I got was fine floater. However, the hills did give some airtime, which is better than nothing, so Goliath is last on this list. Number 10 surprising, the pretzel loop on Superman Ultimate Flight clones. This is a similar case to Goliath, but the other way around. I knew these were going to be good, but they blew me away with their insane intensity. The version at Six Flags Great America was especially wild, as for some reason it felt like it pulled even more forces than the same coaster at Six Flags over Georgia. I have always described these as feeling like an elephant is sitting on your chest, and I think that's pretty true. Number 9 disappointing, the HEADCHOPPER on Ninja at Six Flags St. Louis. Yet another one that was good, but just kinda overhyped for me. Right before this moment is a very janky sidewinder that messes you up and leads you straight into a wonky HEADCHOPPER with the lift chain. I'm not sure how intentional this was, but most people say it's an insane moment. I personally just didn't think so. I found it a bit disappointing and more of a hand chopper than a head chopper, and you'd be insane to still have your hands up after the sidewinder. Number 9 surprising, the 2 back-to-back hills on American Thunder. For the first few years of me riding American Thunder, these hills never really caught my attention. But back in November, I had a marathon in American Thunder in the second to back row and learned that these 2 hills are insane. The first slowly floats you out of your seat as you go over, and when you go down it quickly becomes ejector. The next hill is smaller, and when the coaster hauls, that is ejector all day. After a marathon, my thighs hurt purely from these 2 hills. They are absolutely insane. Number 8 disappointing, the Immelman and Loop on Wildfire at Silver Dollar City. When I first rode this coaster, I didn't go in with any expectations. I was just down to have some fun. The drop surprised me and led me to hope for an intense ride, but the first 2 elements really failed to deliver that. They both felt quite slow and underwhelming, and they were fun, but there just wasn't much to them. If they were just a bit smaller and faster, they could be that much better. Number 8 surprising, Fury 325's drop. The general consensus that I had heard about Fury 325 was that it's pretty forceless. While that is true for most of the ride, it is not at all true for the drop. In the front row, it begins very gradual as you go over the lift hill's tight crest. You slowly begin falling, and falling, and falling, and then out of nowhere you slam into the pullout and get dumped on with positive G-force. It doesn't look like it should provide ground intensity, but somehow it does. Fury 325 has a great and intense drop, and I just wasn't expecting it. Number 7 disappointing, the inline twist on X-Flight at Six Flags Great America. When I went into Great America, I was not really a full enthusiast, and coasters did still scare me a bit. Goliath, the RMC Woody of the park, scared me the most. My plan was to get warmed up with all of the forces, Batman for positives, American Eagle for airtime and laterals, and X-Flight for hangtime. Unfortunately, X-Flight failed to provide any kind of hangtime. The inline twist was slow, but very underwhelming. I blame this on the vest restraints that the coaster has, which get very tight throughout the ride. The near misses were also quite mediocre. I wanted to like this element, but it just didn't do anything for me. Number 7 surprising, the drop on the Boss at Six Flags St. Louis. Ah yes, the Boss. I've talked about this coaster way too much on my channel. I used to hate it, now I love it, blah blah blah. Probably the biggest reason that I now love the Boss so much is the drop. If the operators are nice and allow you to get room in the back car, you will experience the most insane airtime moment in the park, and the only one that I would call standing airtime. It becomes even better during a night ride as you get yanked up and flung down into the abyss of the Boss. Number 6 disappointing. Basically the entirety of the Incredible Hulk at Islands of Adventure. Hulk has been getting a lot of praise from coaster enthusiasts lately, but personally, I don't see why. I only got one ride on it in 2018, but it didn't really impress me very much. The first 0G roll was fun, the Cobra roll was decent, and from there on out, it just felt very boring. Where most people seem to say the coaster is super intense, I felt like I was on a family coaster. I know I sound like I'm being negative, so I will say that it's fun, but for me, it just didn't live up to the hype. Number 6 surprising. The drop on Raging Bull at Six Flags Great America. I think people know that I'm not a very big fan of Raging Bull or B&M Hypers in general, but I will say that Raging Bull does have a very nice drop. Going into it, I had heard nothing good about Raging Bull, as the drop has only become loved recently. While most of the ride barely lived up to my low expectations, the drop shot above. It offered some great floater airtime that was incredibly sustained. The drop feels like it lasts forever. It kinda reminds me of the drop on the Boss, just not nearly as good. It does rank higher though, since this one surprised me more. Number 5 disappointing. The inverted top hat, or 0G stall, or whatever the heck you want to call it on Copperhead Strike at Carowinds. As a whole, I love Copperhead. It's smooth and has some great airtime, but one of the things that people talk about a lot with Copperhead is its insane hang time. There are two main moments, those being the JoJo roll and first loop, but most people also love the inverted top hat element. It is taken very slow, and therefore should, in theory, give crazy hang time. The only problem is, it doesn't. It feels like it ends very quickly and has less than a second of hang time, contrary to what most people say. It's fine, but just not the best. Number 5 surprising. The double corkscrew on Ninja at Six Flags St. Louis. Before you go into the comments and say something like, "Bro, what did you just say to me?" allow me to explain. I rode Ninja for the first time in 2012 or something like that, and never rode it again until 2019. I hated it the first time, so I saw no reason to get back on. However, on my second ride, it really didn't bother me much at all. There were a few bad moments, but for the most part, it was surprisingly fun. One of the parts I had remembered hating the most was the double corkscrews. Except, they were actually good. They weren't intense, they didn't have hang time, they were just smooth and fun, and I was very surprised. Number 4 disappointing. Vertical velocities, launches, and spikes at Six Flags Great America. I didn't expect much from V2, but I was at least hoping for some kind of weightlessness. I got none. The launches made a great sound, but were very weak, and the spikes felt flat out boring. They had no force, they felt slow, and I simply wasn't impressed. Intamin has made some great rides, but sadly, V2 just isn't one of them in my opinion. Number 4 surprising. The drop on Time Traveler at Silver City. I knew this was going to be good, but I had no clue how good. I could never have imagined that it would be as good as it was. You slowly roll out of the station and begin spinning, and then you're dropping. In the front row, it's gradual, but still awesome, as you move quite slowly at a 90-degree angle, and it feels quite strange. But where the drop is really insane is in the back car. With every other car having already gone over the drop, it's only yours left, and those other cars will whip yours down. The drop isn't spread out enough to make it floater airtime, but it is spread out enough to make it sustained. The drop left me absolutely shook, and I had no clue what to say when it was over. Number 3 disappointing. The first loop on Mindbender at Six Flags over Georgia. This was my first looping Schwarzkopf coaster, and from what I had heard, I was expecting some crazy intense stuff. We went down the drop in the back row with me fully prepared to gray out, only I never did. The first loop was pretty tame. It felt like it should have been intense, it just wasn't. Sadly, the rest of the ride kinda ended up following suit, and Mindbender ended up not impressing me very much at all. Number 3 surprising. The non-inverting loop on Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket at Universal Studios Orlando. I am convinced that this is the most overhated coaster that I have been on, because it is actually an awesome ride. It's not very rough at all, and there are some great pops of ejector airtime. The best of these, in my opinion, is the non-inverting loop. You turn up and begin twisting, and as soon as you're 90 degrees into the twist, you start being launched from your seat, and you don't go back down until you're pulling out on the other side. Most people don't love Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket, but I find it to be a great ride with an awesome standout element. Number 2 disappointing. The Boss's Final Helix at Six Flags St. Louis. This helix was garbage. I'm just kidding, of course. I love this helix, which is actually why it is on the list where it is, because the helix is gone. I'm not disappointed in the element itself, but rather, I'm disappointed because it got removed. The turn that replaced it is also quite underwhelming, so I guess you can consider that turn to really be at this spot, but come on, I had to make you question my sanity for a bit. Number 2 surprising. The airtime on Nighthawk at Carowinds. It's been 10 months since I rode Nighthawk, and I still have no idea how to describe the airtime sensation that you get. It's very strange, but on the Fly to Lies and Lie to Flies, you get launched into your surprisingly comfy vest restraint with hard ejector airtime. It's a weird sensation, but it is so cool to experience. I am one of the few people that loves Nighthawk, and the surprising airtime is a big reason why. Number 1 disappointing. The 0G stall on Goliath at Six Flags Great America. I may not have been disappointed by this element normally, but I had heard it was the best 0G stall out there. My expectations were very high. When we were going through the course, the first turn was great, and barely missed the surprising element side of this list. The airtime hill was awesome, the dive loop was fun, but the stall was what I was anticipating most. Then we went up and whipped upside down. This is it? There was no hang time, no floater, no positives, you just kinda hung upside down. Was it cool? Sure, I guess. But it just didn't feel special. In fact, I didn't think it felt all too much different than a simple vertical loop, or at least the upside down portion anyway. Some people say it's the best part of the ride, but it ended up being my second least favorite element. Number 1 surprising. The dive loop on Goliath at Six Flags Great America. Okay, so maybe this isn't really the most surprising element for me, but come on, I gotta make that flow work out. Even without the flow though, this dive loop is a great element that honestly did shock me with how good it was. You fly up at super fast speeds and whip hard into the upside down position. But unlike the stall, this one keeps curving down, and in my opinion provides a much cooler feeling. This is an excellent element, and definitely one of the most underrated and surprising that I have ever been on. That's it for the top 10 most disappointing and surprising elements that I have been on. I guess the moral of the story is don't base your expectations on what others say, and expectations can play a huge role in how much you end up liking a coaster or an element. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed, as it really does help me out. Join the Discord to chat with me and others, and also check out Nader27's channel linked in the description to watch his stuff and a video he has of me playing Rocket League with him. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.